you.
I wasn't thinking, I was just listening to you guys. Okay, so that was the past. Let's talk about the present now. How do you continue to grow and develop in your career? And as you think about the growth and development of your team members, like several of you are managing teams, what do you most want them to learn? And again, we don't have to go in any kind of order here. So
Yeah.
as the thought.
I'd say actually we have a big push right now on my team. We do annual planning every year, and we have this thing at Salesforce called the V2 MOM, which is kind of a funny term, but it's basically vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures, and it's a way to actually plan out a year and think about what you're going to do. And the biggest part of that is actually, if you think about your career for a year and you say, what is the vision for this year? Like, you take a step back and say, what am I going to do? Like, where do I want to be at the end of this year? And we can do those, it can be from an associate interaction designer, all the way up to the CEO. They've got this plan for the year, and it's just great to do this sort of exercise thinking about where you want to be, and then backtrack from that and think about what kind of training you can do, what kind of projects you want to take on, who you should talk to, what relationships you should build, what skills you should acquire. And I think it's a good technique that we've used, but I think the biggest thing that we've been doing lately is that we find ourselves, I think as designers, it's really easy to get absorbed into the internal culture at any company, and I think especially enterprise companies, because the number of inputs and parameters and combinations you have working on different projects is immense. And at Salesforce, I have 30 people on my team and probably 60 Scrum teams, which is just untenable and ridiculous in some ways. But also an amazing challenge another way, which is we had to think about what's true value for this year. Like, where can we actually make a really big difference on a product? And the great thing that we do there, to your point about empathy, is that we spend a lot of time thinking about the year and envisioning our customers and thinking about, what product this year can we tackle where we know it's going to go from absolute, 10-year-old crap to brilliant, or where can we find something that's a completely new opportunity we haven't even thought about yet, and really push forward and make a really disruptive change. And the big thing we've been doing lately is really doing a lot of introspection around how well do we know our customers, how well do we actually know what they're truly doing, and then actually doing all this good analytics stuff around, well, what do we think is the gut piece, and then we do the analytics around what are people actually using. And the amazing thing that we get to do across the team is that becomes an insanely collaborative event, that I can do a team meeting with 30 people, and it's kind of like a mini conference at work where we're all just being like, oh, these are the 3 people we have to think about this year, and we get totally fired up because we know it's the right thing to do. So that's the long answer. The short answer for us this year really is looking at how can we actually affect disruptive change based on evidence-based design, based on insights about our customers, and actually make a really material move for this industry, because we've been doing it for a while, and it's time for us to pick up our boots.
I'll build off of empathy a little bit. The number one trait I look for when I'm hiring is empathy. And I was talking about that a little bit earlier, I think, with Chris. That is the fundamental thing for any UX designer. And being able to place yourself in somebody else's shoes, being able to understand different points of view, enables you to understand your audience and build something specifically for that audience. So having that, and that comes through a lot of time, spending a lot of time with people, as much as you can, getting to know them both in a social manner, also through research and study. And it's just from building things that people use over and over and over again until you see how they react and use it. Empathy, I think, is actually not something, it's like a muscle. You just need to keep using it, keep working at it, and that grows in you, and it is able to make you someone who is able to make products that people love and can just pick up and use. So that's what I'd start with.
Yeah, and I think that that gives UXers an incredibly special skill when it comes to connecting a product to a consumer or a user, from understanding what makes people tick and what they're looking for in a product, and connecting emotionally to a product. That's a really unique skill that UXers have built from empathy. And so I really try in my teams to cultivate the ability to persuade and inspire stakeholders to see that connection, not just the features, the attributes of the product, but how it connects with people and how it meets an unmet need or how it meets a explicit need. I think that UXers have the ability to communicate in a kind of storytelling context how customers connect with products, and that definitely is rooted in empathy.
I can see like coming up with the curriculum for that. Like I
Mhm.
can imagine like having students go up there and have to do public speaking, and you can almost see how the audience is reacting with you, how you're playing with them. Do you have that connection? And there's like many things I think we could do in a curriculum that can build empathy faster, stronger. I think would be interesting.
Well, you do simple devices of if you actually put two people together, have them each tell their story about something, like do an interview question, have them tell a story, and then have the person who did the interview tell the story back out. When you actually just the simple devices that, and anytime you engage in a story, your brain gets involved in so many different functions than just reading bullet points, and it's one of those things that once you're, I don't think it's that anybody who's ever taught is that you think you know something until you try and teach it, and then you find out you know nothing.
Yeah.
And I've done that.
Yeah.
I used to teach video editing back in the day, and my first class was horrible. It was the most embarrassing thing ever. But I think it's one of those things that with customers, and I think that's a great thing, is that when you actually go and interview customers and get to know them, and you're putting together your deck or whatever materials you're doing, is that when you then have to go and convey that to your stakeholders, that's the part where I think when you're listening, you tend to be pretty active and trying to like process things as you go. But as soon as you actually start to get to the point where you're like, I'm now telling you the story of Mary, I'm now telling you the story of Fred, that's at the point where you sort of, I think you get your gut in it. And yeah, that's the part where I think for me, that's when the empathy really hits. It's like, no, you really got to know this person. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not managing anybody at the moment, but I've done a lot of that over the years. And a few things, I agree with the things that have been said, very well put. But a couple of other things are, for one, is to, if you want to get to a certain place in your career that you can kind of feel it, like I'm not where I want to be there. If you can define that really crisply as to an example of a job or a role that you could have in 5 years, say, and understand why for you that would be a great thing, and for the company you work for that would be a great thing to have in you, then magically, I think, just about, you'll tend to make decisions over the next 5 years that get you closer to that goal. You may not get exactly to that in 5 years, but something that's equally satisfying. So that's on top of this short-term kind of 1 year at a time planning and 2 weeks at a time planning and Scrum sort of thing. This longer-term planning on an individual basis is pretty valuable. One thing that comes up in doing that a lot is finding out that there are other skills that you ought to have, and you don't stop learning skills when you finish school, as you all know. But there are specific skills that you'll see in UX people that vary quite a bit. I mean, different UX people have different sets of skill, and I agree that empathy is one of them that's very important. When we did hiring on the LISA, we were hiring engineers, and there was no separation at that time between interaction designers, engineers, information architects, so on. We did have graphic designers. They were a different kind of person altogether. We didn't really get how they did what they did. But the engineers at that time, this is 1980, were designing. And so the way we picked the 1 in 1,000 engineers who could possibly design something like a Lisa, which was the ancestor of the Macintosh, was that they had this, what we now call empathy for users. We didn't use that word. But that was the kind of, we asked the kinds of questions during the interviews that would uncover that. And we looked at the work they had done before and looked for the sign that they really got it, that they needed to put themselves in the shoes of their users and not just find some interesting computer science way of doing something because that's the way they did it back in a previous job.